during a period of normalization, are acting out of a sense of guilt and have plenty of interest to ensure that the transition for him out of the country will be as smooth as possible and will be as least damaging and unstable as possible. This suggests that even beyond the human rights issues, there are growing efforts and perhaps steps being taken to ensure that Gaddafi is barricaded inside of the AlJazeera army barracks where he is located right now, and that members of the regime, the inner circle around him, are being contacted with pressures and perhaps also incentives to persuade them to not launch the counterattacks and not engage in further bloodshed. So human rights issues, global geostrategic issues, oil issues, all of these make Libya especially important. And the international community, I think, is going to be deploying all the instruments it has at its disposal, both unilaterally and multilaterally, to ensure that the transition away from Gaddafi's rule is going to be a smooth one.
But if whatever action the international community takes on this, is it ultimately going to depend on what happens inside Libya and what action the Libyan people take, just as we saw with events in Egypt and Tunisia?
I agree with you. Libya, however, is a bit more complicated. You've got a huge geographical space with a small population, population density. The army is rather decentralized, too many commanders, too many loyalties, tribal, political, security, and otherwise. It is not entirely inconceivable that some of the commanders around Gaddafi himself, who might be the subject of international persuasion and international pressure, might take matters into their own hands and defect from the regime and end matters within Tripoli. That would be the kind of international intervention that could bring swift end to what we're seeing in Libya and perhaps eliminate the possibility of bloodshed taking place in the large population urban centers that are thousands of kilometers away from the center of Tripoli. So many of these steps, in my view, are either on the way, being done, and perhaps Gaddafi can be persuaded in the final analysis to leave the country with his family, and some deal can be worked out that would save Libya the worst possible effects of an outright battle.
Let's put that to Izzaldin Sharif then in Manchester. Is it ultimately going to take people in Gaddafi's inner circle to turn against him for him to be toppled from Libya?
Well, the situation can tell us something could be different as well, because Gaddafi is holding the major war equipment, which can harm a lot of people. Damage also could be the oil. The international community, they have to understand this. I can't see very, very clear light at the end of the tunnel. Gaddafi gave his statement. I know that he is coward enough to leave, maybe change his personality or whatever, or just disappear. But still, there is a possibility of Gaddafi's using the rest of the power he has got against the Libyan people. I just want to bring to your attention that the latest actions from the international community, it didn't come until they have seen that there is no go back for the Libyan people, because they thought maybe Gaddafi will take over very quickly and stop these people from protesting or uprising. But eventually, when they saw that the reality and the situation and the sacrifice that the Libyan people gave to free their country, they thought they have to act right now. And I believe they have to consider a very limited, guaranteed action if they want to do an action against Gaddafi's regime. They have to make it clear it is for a significant action, which is going to be very specific, limited time, and also one target, not to stay in the country anymore. So it is very confusion, but they have to make sure that the Libyan people first, the Libyan people will be first in the country, not to stay in Libya. I know it is a very, very hard decision to be made, but this is the people's choice.
All right.
They said a lot of Libyans, they said they would die fighting Gaddafi rather.
Peggy Hicks, if I could just turn back to you for the final word on this in the minute or so that we have left. With events seemingly moving in the right direction as you see it against Gaddafi's regime in Libya, do you fear though that in the interim there will be much more bloodshed to come, because many people see him as a sort of a cornered animal that is willing to fight to the death at all costs? Do you fear for the Libyan people in that respect?
Well, I think this argument that he's been backed into a corner is something that we've had to fight against, actually. Gaddafi is in a corner, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, he's gotten by with impunity for all these years. The fact that he's now facing accountability isn't going to make him any worse. As your own questions showed, it's not as if the lack of accountability changed how he behaved over these years. But what it will, we hope, do is send a message to those around him that they should not engage in more bloodshed. Yes, there's a risk, but we're desperately hoping, of course, that that message gets to the right people and that they recognize that they don't want to stand with Gaddafi, that they won't fire on civilians and they won't take those types of actions.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank all of our guests for taking part in the discussion. Peggy Hicks in Geneva, Azeldin Sharif in Manchester, and Tariq Youssef here in Doha. Many thanks for your time. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments, your opinions and suggestions. You can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.
It is in the details. A look. A connection. The moments that reveal the truth. Award-winning documentaries from critically acclaimed filmmakers. Witness documentaries to open your eyes. At this time on Al Jazeera.
All the news, all the time. AlJazeera.net/English.
As geeks take on dictators, bloggers turn dissidents, and social networks root for social justice, governments are going cyber, spying on their citizens, erecting firewalls like iron curtains, and closing down websites. We ask, is cyber-generated change virtual or real? Empire at this time on Al Jazeera.
March on Al Jazeera. In 2009, Al Jazeera visited the cities worst affected by the financial downturn. Now, 2 years later, we return as European leaders discuss the debt crisis.
In a new 8-part series, Al Jazeera looks